The Joy Perspective, the podcast where I share life's challenges, things I've learned through years of personal development, and help others shift their perspective and find their joy. I'm Lauren Valdez, and together we'll dive into how changing the way we think can unlock possibilities, spark creativity, and transform the everyday. Let's dive in. Hello, I'm Lauren Valdez, and welcome to today's episode of The Joy Perspective. Today, we are talking about the word honesty and how honesty and being truthful can really bring you joy. Now, I'm going to tell you kind of what we've been telling our kids for the last, couple years is, we grow up hearing this over and over. Tell me if this rings a bell for you. You grow up, you make a mistake, or you do something, and somebody goes and tattles on you, and your parents tell you, hey, you better tell the truth, because if you lie, you're going to be in way more trouble than you would be if you just told the truth. Now, this is what we've been telling our kiddos. We've caught our kiddos in, a couple lies. And, my daughter especially, she likes to be like, well, I was just kidding, or I was just joking. And we have to remind her, like, there's a time to be silly, and there's a time to have fun, and there's a time to be serious. And right now, I'm asking you to be honest. So we grow up from a young age hearing how being honest is going to keep us out of trouble. Well, as much trouble, I should say. We still tell our kids there's going to be consequences for your actions, but you'll be in less trouble if you tell the truth. If you get caught in a lie, you're going to be in way more trouble. And now some are from childhood to adulthood, being raised and grown up hearing these things of make sure you're honest, always tell the truth, don't lie. Then we become an adult and we feel like we have to protect ourselves. We feel like we have to sometimes hide the vulnerability that's really going on. And why is that? We feel like others around us have hurt us whenever we were open and honest. And so we start to transform our thinking and our habits into putting up safeguards and protecting ourselves. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not telling you to go around to everybody and every situation and be overly sharing and overly honest and put yourself out there and be vulnerable to every single person. But when you really think about those in your life that you do life with, your closest friends, maybe your family, your spouse, your best friend, maybe even your closest coworker, are you being truthful and honest with them? I have this sickness, is what I call it, where if somebody asks me, how are you doing? I am known to overshare. And it's because I grew up thinking if I am not sharing every detail, then I'm lying. So when somebody says, how are you doing? It used to be really hard for me to just say, good, how are you? Because inside I wanted to be like, good, but I'm also trying to figure out how I'm going to juggle my kid's soccer schedule. On top of it, my daughter wants to join dance again. And now that I'm back in school, I like overshare and word vomit on people. And then I started to learn that like maybe people don't care so much about every little detail when they ask, how are you? And I started to stop. And I teach myself to only share a little bit. Don't lie. Don't say great when you're really doing horrible, but also not to word vomit. And what happens over time, and what happened for me, was I actually started to learn how to hide what was really going on. And what happens is it becomes inauthentic with what I'm saying. And it becomes this habit and it becomes this part of you that shields how you're really doing. So today's episode about honesty is actually about being honest with yourself. I grew up always hearing, tell the truth, don't tell a lie. Then I started to learn that I needed to protect myself and guard my heart and guard myself. And then it got to the point where it was hard to even be honest with myself. Whether it was because I would be embarrassed that I had arrived at whatever point it was, or if it was just because I needed to be this strong, independent, I can take on anything type of personality that became who I was. So, today's episode, I want to share with you guys how important it is to be open and honest. Now, I'm not saying go onto your Facebook or your Instagram or your TikTok and go live and share every single day about woe is me. But I am asking you to have real, authentic, honest conversations with those around you and with yourself. So, small story here. Back in October of 2023, it was a couple months after my mom's passing, and I had found myself falling into a bit of a depression and where my anxiety was peaking. And I just felt like I couldn't really control the irritation and the withdrawnness that I was experiencing. So, after an explosion on my husband, poor guy, I paused for a moment. I was like, this is not me. This is not how I want to be. And so I decided to get on anxiety medication and to really get a grip on what was going on. And a couple months later, I felt like I was doing great. I got off of the medication. Fast forward 2 years, and here we are in October, November of 2025. And it finally hit me again, where I was like, I need to be vulnerable and honest and open with myself. A friend recently was telling me that her doctor was like, look, if you had thyroid issues, we would give you thyroid medication. If you had an insulin deficiency, we would give you insulin, right? But when it comes to mental health, some people have a hard time accepting that that's what they need is something to help them in whatever area it is, anxiety, depression, OCD, whatever it is. And I don't think that that's where my issue was because I had been on medication before and I was open and honest about when I was on medication. It wasn't necessarily that I was embarrassed or felt it was taboo to be on medication. I think what the issue really was I was not being honest with myself. I was coming up with excuses or burying the truth underneath and just like, well, I haven't been working out like I should be working out, or I'm drinking too much caffeine, so of course my anxiety, and I would make these excuses instead of slowing down enough to go, you know what? Let's have an open and honest conversation with myself about these are my needs and this is where I go from here. Now, this doesn't have to be about anxiety or depression or whatever it is for you. This could be any situation in your life. What area have you made excuses about? What area have you hid the truth underneath because you're afraid of being vulnerable and open, even with yourself, like I was? So, when we talk about being honest, I can tell you that when I finally accepted and finally slowed down enough to be like, you know what? This is what I actually really need right now. I do need to go back to the doctor and to get some medication and to work on my mental health again. I stopped having that internal resistance and I started feeling free. I started feeling joy about it. And I have to tell you, something about being honest, not just with yourself, but with those around you. The friend who shared the comment from their doctor about the thyroid, she was being open and honest with me and sharing with me, which allowed me to have another person backing me up. I also, I went down to the soccer field and while I was sitting next to another mom, her and I started talking. And by me opening up about my anxiety, brought her to a place where she felt like she could be open and honest and talk about the medication that she was on. Funny enough, we both take the same medication. And the reason I'm sharing this is I was open and honest. She was open and honest. And through our vulnerability, we also found somebody else that can back us up and to be a support to us. So often we feel like we have to be so strong and so put together. And the reality is, when we allow ourselves to be open and honest, we allow others around us to also be open and honest. Whether or not it was about the same thing, they know they can trust us. They know that we are being vulnerable with them, so they can be vulnerable with us. And that honesty brings authentic relationships, authentic friendships. And I want to take this one step further. Being honest with yourself brings an authentic relationship with yourself. You know, when you're growing up, you hear from people that are older than you. They're like, "Oh, if only I knew now what I knew in my if only I knew in my 20s what I knew now, or if only I knew in my 30s what I knew now." People grow and constantly learn more about themselves. But the sooner you allow yourself to be vulnerable and honest with yourself, the more you will learn about yourself and the more joy will come into your life. Don't feel like you have to have it all together. Don't feel like you have to have everything perfect. Just be honest with yourself. What are your needs? What is your body or your mind or your experiences telling you that you need? Be honest so you can experience the joy of every day. Thank you for joining me today on The Joy Perspective. I hope this episode helped you shift your mindset and find a little bit more joy in your life. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss one. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Meet Lauren Valdez for more inspiration and updates. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Until next time, keep shifting your perspective and finding your joy.